Hello, and here's a presentation I ran a few weeks back for the Business Agility Institute. Something called Your Agile Transformation Sucks? Probably. Yeah, I say probably because usually it's a large proportion of transformations fail, extremely large, one that makes you wonder how we get into those states. So I've hypothesized that there's 5 particular mistakes that get in the way of agile transformations being run successfully. But ultimately, I think there's one meta reason, one meta mistake, and that's the agile transformation starting incorrectly. This leads to what I call pseudo transformations versus agile transformations. Sorry, genuine agile transformations. And all of these mistakes are caused by a lack of agile mindset. So without further ado, let's blast on and talk about some of these things. But before I do, a couple of things. What do we mean by mindset? There's a lot of talk out there in the agile space at the minute about what agile mindset is or what it isn't. Ultimately, to me, it's about agile psychology. It's about how we are able to manage our thinking, how we are able to think, and think in very, very different ways. It's not like some people would describe that it's just about changing the content of your thinking. It's not at all about that. It's more about changing how you think and how you solve problems. And this is ultimately what I do, is help leaders to adapt their mindset to become more agile. So the 5 mistakes. The 5 mistakes are no dialogue, inappropriate sponsorship, manager's mindset, Agile transformation, and team-only transformation. So let's quickly go through each of those for you in the shortest possible time. So before we do though, let me just give you a metaphor that I use to help people understand the differences between agile process and organizational agility. Agile process starts something like this. Within the IT department somewhere, somebody's going to come up with a bright idea about, ooh, let's go agile, let's do agile. Agile's a good thing, I've heard about this. So some people, some bright sparks get together and they actually go and do some what we call pilots. They run some pilots, some agile pilots, so that they can test to see whether agile works in this particular set of contexts in this organization. And quite often they find that actually, yeah, this is quite difficult. It's not as easy as we thought it might be, but you know what? It's fun and enjoyable, and we're getting results. So ultimately, after a period of time, this agile starts to get a bit of traction in the IT department or in the software development areas or whatever. And it starts to get the attention of more senior managers. People begin to wonder, oh, there seems to be something happening. There's a bit of a buzz going on in the IT department or something. But ultimately, things are starting to change, and we now want to start to do agile across the whole organization. This is where then we start to step into the world of organizational agility, but we make a fundamental flaw, which I'll come to in a moment. So what happens next? Well, the middle managers get involved. I don't mean this in a bad sense about middle managers, because they got a hard job. I understand it. I get it. They're trying to meet the needs of the leaders, and the leaders are telling them what it is they want or need, etc., etc., etc. But here's what what tends to happen with the aid of a couple of Dilbert cartoons. Of course, the pointy-haired manager is not a very intelligent guy, but I'd say there's a lot more intelligent middle managers out there than this guy. But yeah, the whole thing about using terminology as a way of trying to impress people, and you don't actually know what it means. And you come across, I've come across these people almost on a daily basis. It takes a very honest and down-to-earth person to say, actually, do you know what, Mark? I don't understand what this agile thing is. Can you help me understand? And I'll spend hours, days, weeks, months, years helping someone to understand. And I'll be as patient as you like. But what I have no patience for is people who claim to know what agile is and go off sneaking in the background, try and learn it for themselves and come back and impress you by plucking the odd buzzword from here and there to try and impress you. And then when you go to correct them and say, actually, that's not exactly what it means, they go running off in the opposite direction. But anyway, middle managers, take them or leave them. But ultimately, they're the ones who tend to now be the ones who sponsor the agile organization, the agile transformation. So, but of course, one of the first things the agile manager or the middle manager will do, because maybe they're not so agile, will be to bring in the consultants. And hence the second cartoon here about Dogbert the consultant. Yes, it seems that a lot of organisations, especially larger ones, tend to be very good at giving money to consultants, especially big branded names, because it gives them a bit of kudos and a bit of sexiness and stuff. Yeah, which it's all by the by, because ultimately not many of those organisations, those very big consulting houses, really know much about Agile. They might write some good articles on it and tell you what they think they know, but trust me, when you get them in the organisation and they start to do things to your organisation, you begin to understand that actually they've just got a one-size-fits-all, paint by numbers approach, to Agile transformation, which ultimately fails. And I think that's a big reason why we have a high failure rate of Agile transformation. And we'll talk about that more in mistake number 3. So let's rapidly take us on to mistake number 1, no dialogue. Look, that's very, very simply discussed, because ultimately this is about the senior leaders in the organisation understanding what we mean and what we don't mean by Agile, and what we mean and what we don't mean by Agile transformation. What's going to happen as a result of this? And again, the two things that are quite often mixed up is the difference between Agile process, i.e. what the IT people are doing down in the depths of the organisation, versus organisational agility, which brings me to the next part of my metaphor. Now, if you imagine that Agile was to start, if organisational agility was to start from the bottom up, you'd end up in a bit of chaos, which is quite often what happens. So, for instance, if you use my hobby gardener metaphor, that if I'm a hobby gardener and I want to create an enterprise, by gardening, it's unlikely I'm going to do it from my back garden, depending on the size of my back garden. But I can promise you that I think it's about 30 meters or something. It's not a very big garden. It's big enough, but I can't start really an organisation or an enterprise from here. So, in which case, if I wanted to do this, I need to think about this in a top-down fashion. Okay. And again, that's not the whole answer, but ultimately it just brings about the next question, which will come up in a minute, which is about who sponsors the Agile transformation. So ultimately, there's our two aspects. Organizational agility, I believe, is something that's done top down and inside out. There's a huge amount of personal development that's going to be needed on the part of the leaders and the managers. And this is before you even start to roll out Agile for the rest of the organization, before you start doing change to people. So, how to get by mistake number 1? Well, there are a couple of antidotes to that. Hire a trusted Agile advisor. Someone like myself who actually has been around the game, has got the t-shirt, many t-shirts, a wardrobe full of t-shirts in fact, lots of grey hair, people who actually know what they're talking about, Quite often I go into organisations and I come face to face, toe to toe with consultants in there who are trying to convince me blind that this particular methodology that they're running is the very, very thing that's going to actually save this organisation, and I very much doubt that. So hence, hiring a trusted Agile advisor, someone who you can trust, someone who is well informed about all the different processes and can actually help you to understand which is the best one for your organisation, if that's what you're looking at, if you're looking at Agile process. If you're looking at organisational agility, that's a very different set of conversations, and in which case the trusted Agile advisor will be one who should be able to help you in that regard too, because the trusted Agile advisor will be someone who's very cognizant about culture, behaviours and people, because this is ultimately the core of Agile. It's not about the process, it's not about the tools, but it is about people, it is about interactions, and it is about relationships. So the second thing I'd always advise then is to attend a day-long Agile Leadership 101, which will give the leadership team all it is they need to know to help them understand the vision, the values, and all the good stuff to actually start thinking about organisational agility for their organisation. And you can find out more details about that by website. Second mistake, inappropriate sponsorship. So now inappropriate sponsorship, this means that the manager who resides at the middle of the organisation, if they are running the Agile transformation, I can promise you what they won't do is be sending any change up to the senior leaders. Guys, I need you to change. I need you as a senior leaders to change your behaviours and your patterns and ways of working. I need you to change. That's what I call a career-limiting move, telling your boss that they need to change so that you can do your job properly. But actually, they're right though. That is what needs to happen. But unfortunately, it can't come from the middle manager because, as I say, that becomes a career-limiting move. So hence, Agile transformation in the form of organizational agility needs to start from the CEO down, and the CEO needs to be the sponsor of it. And the CEO will only be, the reason I say why the CEOs should be the sponsor of this is because it's about overcoming the politics across the silos. And here I gave a little idea to people, something to go away and read, a thing called Games People Play, because politics is about getting one-upmanship. If it's negative politics, of course, there's beneficent politics too, but for the sort of politics that's played in organisations, it's all about playing games. So one of the things I'd often do is to help raise people's levels of awareness around what games have been played in the organisation. So the antidote to mistake number 2, CEO to sponsor. Okay, that's a very simple and straightforward one. But then I'd say quickly behind that, it comes hiring a CCCO, a Chief Culture Change Officer, to help bring about this thing called a one-team dynamic. Now, it's just so apparent that CEOs, because they're already maxed out doing what they're doing at the moment, that it's unlikely they're actually going to go and sponsor their own Agile transformation. So they're going to need someone to come in and do that for them. So this is where I believe the CCCO sits across the whole organisation and is answerable only to the Chief Executive Officer. And if you like, is in a peerage or with peers, their peers on the senior executive team. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so manager's mindset. Okay, so now here's where it gets a little interesting, because this is where people start thinking that I might be criticising them and how they're working, and quite often I might be. But the third big mistake that will end up railroading your Agile transformation is the idea that your managers who live in the middle of the organisation are as agile as they need to be, because they're not. Their agile thinking is rather limited, and their agile thinking is limited to still working the way they've always worked, which is most likely in command and control. And when you think of it, it stands to reason, really, isn't it? Because if you were thinking about transforming an organisation from a crusty old bureaucratic hierarchical organisation to one that's super dynamic and sexy and all that sort of stuff, and so totally agile, do you think that manager now has the skills and the capabilities, competencies and capacities to be able to do that? Well, they might have the capacity, but they have to get there. And how are they going to get there? Well, they just don't want to be told, most of them. They don't actually put themselves up or offer themselves for coaching. And I've run many experiments across many organisations where I always offer the coaching to all the people, all and sundry. And the people who take me up on the offer of coaching all the time tends to be the people at the lower parts of the organisation. So it just goes to show that the people at the middle parts of the organisation tend to think they're agile enough already, and they're really not. But also, it actually is a little worse than that. So something I would offer people to go away and look at is something called leadership agility. Because in this, Bill Joyner and Stephen Josephs identify a means and a mechanism whereby we can start to measure the mindset of leaders and managers across the organisation. So to say any more that this is something that is totally qualitative and not quantitative is absolutely wrong, because we can look at the behaviours that people are employing and very quickly get an idea of the mindset that's behind them. But it's not just the managers or some of the leaders in the organisation that are the issues. As I've said in the past, sometimes comes down to the consultants, the helpers I'll call them here. Because quite often the helpers themselves aren't of a sufficient agile mindset to be able to carry out the transformation, and that's rather unfortunate. So what will tend to happen is these people will take the organisation backwards. So hence the leaders, when they're signing up for a certain course or initiative or something like that, they think they're going to be moving forward, where actually they're going backwards, because what tends to happen is a lot gets stirred up in the organisation that the people with the less than agile mindsets just don't know how to cope with. So this ends up in all sorts of chaos and problems, and hence if you don't have the right people helping you, you are going to end up in trouble. Trust me on that one. So the antidote to mistake number 3, hire consultants with the requisite level of agile mindset. I can introduce you to a few of those, and when you go and look at my website in a few weeks or months' time, you'll hopefully find a whole bunch of trusted agile advisors up there that you can pick and choose from. And coach the leaders before you coach the teams. And after you've coached the leaders, then coach the managers. I'm going to rapidly fly through the next couple of slides now. Agile transformation. Look, in just simple terms, all I'm saying is this is when the two cultures collide. Already you'll have in place this, remember I talked about the crusty hierarchical type of organization. You'll already have that in place, and that's pretty damn fun and fantastic. It's probably got you to where you are and make you feel rather successful and important. That's absolutely awesome. However, if you want to now move to somewhere else and you're starting Agile, you're starting that from the bottom up, and you've got your waterfall process coming from the top down, what happens? Who wins when the waterfall process, which has got all the power, status and authority from the managers at the top, when that hits the lower echelons, of agility and self-empowerment and all that sort of fun stuff? It doesn't take a genius to work it out, does it? Because what will tend to happen is the waterfall process will win every time, because the leaders will demand they want their reports, they want them yesterday, and they want them in the same old way they've been done. Oh, but by the way, can you put some extra bells and widgets on it for us so it makes us look even better, so it makes us think that we're more agile than we actually are? And again, this just tends to be a bit of an abomination. So if you're going to do Agile, you do it from the top down, and you replace the waterfall governance process that's currently in place with a more Agile one. That's a rather simple and straightforward thing to do if you have the mindset of propensity to do it and the desire to want to do it, to actually change how you're doing things. And very often you will give me reasons as to why that now is not the good time to do it. Maybe come back to us in 6 months' time or a year's time, we'll do it then. But in the meantime, go and make the teams Agile. Well, there we are. Go waste your money. Not an issue. Antidote to mistake number 4, plan and deliver Agile transformation in an Agile way. I have it from the top down. Yeah, Agile from the top down. And once the leaders start their coaching, they turn their attention to the management layers, as I was just saying previously. After you've coached the leaders, and maybe even still while you're coaching the leaders, start to help the managers now to start to think in more Agile ways, because they will still be expecting the leaders to act in the ways that they have done, but the leaders won't be now acting in these ways because they'll be informed by their Agile coach about different things to ask for, and you want the managers ready to be able to support that. And the 5th and final, the team-only transformation. Well, look, this sort of leans on the last mistake a little bit, because it's sort of everything that I feel is wrong with Agile transformations out there at the moment is because they're all team focused. They're all focused on the depths and the bowels of the organization. You'll hear about all this stuff around DevOps and all that sort of fun thing, and it's all about getting the teams working in squads and tribes and use the Spotify model and da-da-da-da. Yeah, and look, this is like money for old rope for the consultancies, for the large consulting organizations who are just churning out the same old recipe time and time and time again, hoping that it'll work in this organization, but with their ace card up their sleeve, that if it doesn't, well, we can just blame the leaders or the managers or the people in the organization, that they just weren't ready for Agile. And that, to me, is a crying shame. And honestly, it shouldn't be allowed. And hence, in my world, it's about holding the consultants accountable, for the solutions that they drop on organizations. Anyway, that's another tangent, and for another day. So look, there's a big question that leaders have to ask themselves is, how do we go about empowering our people without losing control? And again, this all comes back top down. You've got to start working with the leaders, helping them to understand how empowerment can happen, without people thinking that it's about acting in ways that are laissez-faire, I think is the expression that's used by Riggio and Bass. Anyway, antidote to mistake number 5. Before attempting to do Agile at scale, leaders attend the Agile Bootcamp and they learn how to do Agile at personal level rather than be thinking about what's going to happen down the teams. Are they doing the stand-ups and retrospectives and whatever? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter for the leaders. Once they've run a few Agile pilots and are happy that the Agile process works all hunky-dory down that part of the organisation, now we're looking at organisational agility. It's the leaders who need to get on board. And it's the whole Gandhi thing about be the change they want to see, which incidentally, Gandhi didn't say that, but hey, whatever. I'm sure, somebody will point that out at some point in the future somewhere. So that's it. That's the 5 mistakes that will lead you to death and ruination of your Agile transformation. If you want to know more about any things I've talked about in here or some of the points I've made and you'd like to know more, then please feel free to contact me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. There's my LinkedIn thingamajig, hyperlink there. And my website's now gone live again. I took it down for a while because it was, old styley for me. So we're actually looking at some different things that we're doing at the moment. I actually haven't put the web address up though, which is rather silly of me. But it's www.theagileleader.co.uk. And if you also want to buy my book, you can do that by clicking on the link there. If not, you can also do that from my website. It should be quite easy to find. This comes under Buy the Book Now. Thank you very much for your time. It's been awesome chatting to you all. And here is the research I promised at the end. And I'm sure there's far more there besides as well, which if anyone else knows of any other research that either complements the research I've given or contradicts it, then please get in touch. Anyway, thank you for your time, and look forward to hearing from you soon. Goodbye. So human